different species. It's from animal to animal. Therefore, we have to discuss the estrous cycle of a different type of a animals and it, the estrous cycle also present in all the animals and all the different species with a variations. So we will talk that how it is to perform in the animal to animal the estrous cycle. The estrus is a noun. The cow is displaying a estrus. Uh, the estrus is an adjective. The word estrus may have in the adjective position the meaning the length of estrus cycles is 21 days. So the same word can be written as a estrus in a British language or European spelling is a estrus, Oestous. So the estrus and the heat are a synonymous words being used by the farmers. The estrous cycle is a reproductive cycle of a female. Genetic journal defined as the period from one estrus to the next. So it's a cycle that is having different phases and the stages. So the estrous cycle is a cycle which starts from estrus and it ends at the another estrus. So they have two phases in the estrus, the follicular phase and luteal phase. The phases of the estrous cycle, the follicular phase, as I have described over here, that has a short phase only of a 20% of a cycle. So the period from a regression of a corpus luteum to ovulation. So pre-ovulatory follicles are a dominant hormone is estradiol. So this phase, the follicular phase, is only to ovulate the egg or ova from the ovary, and the follicles are ruptured, grown up, and then ruptured, matured, and ruptured. It gives the ova. So this is the estrocycle phase in which the ova is produced. The phase of estrocycle, that's the luteal phase, which is 80% of the cycle. So it means the estrocycle having two phases. One is the follicular phase and other is the luteal phase. So the estrocycle having a long phase, 80% of the cycle, and that periods from ovulation to a corpus luteum regression. So the corpus luteum, the dominant hormone is a progesterone. When the corpus luteum persists on the ovary, it produces a progesterone. So the progesterone hormone is higher in the concentration when the corpus luteum persists on the ovary. So the follicle continues to grow and regress during this phase. So follicles are in a growing stage and the regress during this phase, the follicles. So therefore, the corpus luteum persists and grows and develops in the crown shaft in the cow, whereas it is larger in a size and it is increasing in a size when the pregnancy passes. So the corpus luteum persistence is showing that the animal is pregnant. So estrous cycle is the phases in which the reproductive cycle between the periods of estrus. These are the phases of a reproductive readiness in the reproductive system of a mature female. जब mature female हो जाती है तो उसमें estrous cycle start होता है. Under puberty होती है female तो उसमें reproductive cycles या estrous cycle नहीं होता मौजूद. तो इस इनमें चार phases होते हैं when there is a the cycle does not occur during a pregnancy nor when a female is in a any stress. तीन कंडीशंस में मोस्टली जो है वो estrous cycle मौजूद नहीं होता. Estrous cycle ceases. One is the estrous cycle is ceased in the pregnancy, and the estrous cycle also season in the condition of anestrus. Anestrus can be due to many reasons, which we will describe in the later on. लेकिन अंडर प्यूबर्टी होगा तो उसमें भी estrous cycle जो है मौजूद नहीं होगा उन एनिमल्स में जो अंडर प्यूबर्टी होंगे. So anestrus is the absence of a cycling when the female is not having a repeated estrous cycles. जब estrous cycle का जो स्टेजेस हैं वो कैरी ऑन नहीं करेंगी और estrous cycle चलेगा नहीं, तो दैट कंडीशन इज नोन एज एन एनीस्ट्रस, जिसमें estrous cycle मौजूद नहीं होता. तो इट मे अकर ड्यू टू अ डिजीज की वजह से estrous cycle नहीं चलेगा और एनीस्ट्रस स्टेज जो है डेवलप होगी. नॉट बीइंग अ रिप्रोडक्टिव एज, या फिर रिप्रोडक्टिव एज नहीं अचीव की है किसी जानवर ने, अंडर प्यूबर्टी है तब भी estrous cycle स्टार्ट नहीं होगा, या अदर कंडीशंस लाइक सीजनल जो है एनिमल्स हैं उसमें एनीस्ट्रस होगा. और इवन दी estrus may have to stop in the disease conditions or nutritional reasons, or there are so many reasons which may have to develop the anestrus. So we will discuss those reasons in the later slides. So stages of a estrus cycle, there are 4 stages. One is the proestrus, estrus, metaestrus, diestrus. So the follicular phase having the proestrus and estrus, and the luteal phase has a metaestrus and a diestrus. So these 4 stages are being again these 4 stages are converted into 2 phases. One is the follicular phase and other is the luteal phase. So mostly these 4 stages are covered into a follicular phase and a luteal phase, or even you have to see the 4 stages, the pre-estrus, estrus, and metaestrus, and diestrus. This is a cycle which cycles in the 4 stages. So the proestrus starts in which the mostly the vaginal impedance may have to reduce. Then the metaestrus having a hormonal imbalance, the estrus has a peak of a estrogen level, and the mostly the this cycle starts with proestrus and it has to end up at a proestrus. Whenever it may have to start from a proestrus that begins when the progesterone declines, luteolysis, and ends at onset of the estrus. जब proestrus start होगा तो उसमें luteolysis होगी, तो that has end up to the estrus, and the estrus will start that last by 2 to 5 days in a proestrus condition. In this, the estrus is being begin to develop, and the period of a major endocrine transition, that the progesterone dominance to estrogen dominance. So progesterone has to decline in its concentration, or estrogen has to increase in its concentration. So this condition, the proestrus, has to increase the estrogen level in the body, and it has to start the follicular stimulating hormone, and then the luteinizing hormone is responsible for rupture the follicles to shed the ova. So the building up of the ovarian follicles starts in the proestrus with an enclosed ovum, increase in a size. The ovum has to increase it, build up, and the egg has to be produced by the luteinizing effect. So the estrogens absorbed from the follicles into the bloodstream stimulates increased vascularity and cell growth of a tubular genitalia in presentation in the preparation of estrus and pregnancy. Mostly the proestrus has to develop the female, and there is a preparation of estrus in which the animal mounts on the female mares, so that this mounting may have to show that the estrus has started. So in the estrus condition, the period of a sexual receptivity, a large increase in the estrogen, that stimulates the luteinizing releasing hormone, and follicular stimulating hormone decreases due to the estrogen that inhibits the level of a follicular stimulating hormone under the feedback mechanism, and inhibin also stops the follicular stimulating hormone to release. So during a shortly after estrus, ovulation occurs due to a major surge in the luteinizing hormone. फॉलिकल जो है रप्चर होगा, ओवा शेड होगा, एवोल्यूशन होगी जब ल्यूटिलाइजिंग हार्मोन की इंक्रीज होगी, और ल्यूटिलाइजिंग हार्मोन की इंक्रीज होती है आफ्टर start of estrus. So the luteinizing hormone level increases due to a luteinizing hormone releasing hormone which releases from the pituitary gland, and estrus stops once ovulation occurs. जब ovulation हो जाएगी तो estrus has to stop. So this is the phases in which on the zero level, if you see that before a heat 6 to 10 hours, the animals does not allow a male to come near to the female. When the standing heat comes down, then the animal allows to a male to perform a mating or for a coitus, whereas after the heat, after 10 hours, the eggs are released, and then again the animal does not allow a male to be near to a female. So the life of an egg starts that is a 6 to 10 hours to mate uh, um, with the sperm and to fertilize the egg. So the sperm travels from a vagina to the oviduct in 6 to 10 hours to mate with the egg and to fertilize the ovum. Mate estrus is a condition in which the corpus luteum predominant that increases the progesterone level and decreases in the estrogen level. So endometrium lining thickens and uterine muscles show an increased development. Mate estrus condition has to start after a estrus. तो ईस्ट्रस हो गया, कार्पस ल्यूटियम जो है डेवलप होना शुरू होगा. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल after a rupture of the follicles, the corpus luteum hemorrhagicum will develop, and then later on the corpus luteum has to grow up. And this will allow the release of a progesterone, and then the zygote has to develop, and that has to attach with the mother uterus where the pregnancy will start. And this estrogen will be low whenever there is a little phases to start, and then the um, the ovulation has to take place, and the corpus hemorrhagicum uh, will be present, and the uterine contraction subsides, and endometrial glands has to continue to grow and becomes coiled. In cattle, bleeding occurs in the mate estrus. The follicular stimulating hormone increases, and the triggering growth of the follicles develops. So that's in the mate estrus, the animal will show the signs of a in the cow, the bleeding starts, which is a sign of a end of the estrus period, and the mate estrus has started. In the mate estrus, the animal will not allow the male for mating, or for even if the animal has not been given, or the male has not been provided in the estrus period, but the mate estrus has started, then the female will not allow the male to mount. So relatively, the diestrus is a short period of time between the estrus cycles during the breeding season of a polyestrous animals. जो polyestrous animals हैं, उसमें the estrus cycle is of a short duration, in which the diestrus has a no reproductive activity, and diestrus has to uh, develop the progesterone level high follicular stimulating hormone will increases, and then the growth of the follicles will develop, and the um, uterus has to start final, but the volume is gradually decreases. The contraction stops, and the corpus luteum regression at the end of the period. Female is not pregnant due to a follicular prostaglandin release. So in the diestrus, if the animal is not pregnant, then the proestrus will start after a prolonged diestrus may have to develop due to a corpus luteum fully functional, or high levels of a progesterone is produced. The animal, if it is a pregnant and the corpus luteum is a fully functional, then the diestrus is developed, or which will be prolonged. If there is a disease having a corpus luteum cyst over there, then the diestrus will also having a long period, or it will be prolonged. The high level of the progesterone is producing due to any pathological reasons, then the diestrus in the polyestrus, seasonal polyestrus animals will prolong. एंड विद द ल्यूटिलाइसिस, ये जो है ल्यूटिलाइसिस जब होगी तो ये डाइस्ट्रस जो है वो एंड करेगा. That has to take a 10 to 14 days depending on the species of animal. ये distress can be prolonged up to a 10 to 14 days if there is a pathological conditions, or it might have any reason to prolong the distress. Mostly it takes 10 to 14 days, but again it depends on animal to animal. The distress period varies. So therefore, in the proestrus, if you see that the formation of ovulatory follicles and estrogen secretions has to increase, estrous cycle में sexual receptivity will has to increase, and then the peak of estrogen level achieved in the estrous cycle stage. Whereas the mate estrus में corpus luteum formation होगी या beginning of a progesterone secretion start होगा. डाइस्ट्रस में सस्टेंडेड ल्यूटल सिक्रीशन सो ऑफ ए प्रोजेस्ट्रॉन जो है वो सस्टेन करेंगी इन अ डाइस्ट्रस. In estrus, it's one of the period in which the animal does not show the estrus cycle. So that might be a long of an activity between the sexual season. No regular estrus cycle will be observed, and ovaries relatively inactive, and no follicles or a corpus luteum develops. So this might be the estrous cycle. The having the estrous cycle is comprised of four phases, as I have described over there. The phases occurs in a definite sequence unless the female is pregnant. अगर female pregnant नहीं है तो estrous cycle चलता रहेगा. Again, the species to species, the estrous cycle varies. The estrous cycle period of a sexual receptivity, estrous cycle is a stage in which the animal receives the male, or it may allow for a coitus or a mating to the males. Whereas normally the animal does not allow, the female does not allow the male for a coitus, or for a courtship, or for the mating. So commonly referred to as a heat. The ruminant animals allow the male only when they are in heat. So this an estrus period when the female does not show the estrus cycle. So the estrus cycle, whenever the female does not experience the estrus cycle, this is known as a anestrus. That might be during a pregnancy. The anestrus may have to be observed during a pregnancy or a false pregnancy, or even the animal is in the pathological conditions, the anestrus may have to prolong. There are estrus cycles which is classified as that the animals of a different species have a different type of estrous cycle. One, the animals which are a polyestrous having a continuous or a repeated estrous cycles, such as cows and sows, they are the polyestrous animals that can show the estrus at any season, any weather, or it may have to persist for a whole year. So seasonal polyestrous, the animals which shows the estrous cycle only in a certain times of the year, including mares, queens, eves, and nanny goats, they show the estrus seasonally. The they have a polyestrus, but in the particular season, they can show the cycle of a estrous cycle in such a season. So the monoestrus that only one cycle per year, such as a bitches, show a one or at the most two heats per year. So these are known as a monoestrus animals that has to show the estrus cycle in a year, or they may have to show the estrus cycle twice a year. So therefore, the dogs, the cats may have to show the monogast. They are a monogast estrus animals. They will show only a estrus in a year or twice a year. Now, the polyestrous continuous animals let the uniform distribution of a estrous cycle which occurs regularly throughout the year. For example, the cattle show the polyestrous cycle. Swines are rodents. The rodents have a polyestrous cycle like cattle, like swines. So these animals will show the regular cycling in a year. So in जानवरों में continuous होता है, and if there is a disturbance in the cycle, that might be due to a disease or due to a abnormality or a pathological conditions. So therefore, that the this anestrus can be treated by the use of a hormonal therapy. Seasonal polyestrus. Seasonal polyestrus that the cycles occurs only during a certain times of the year. मतलब अगर ये cold season में twice a year अगर cold आती है तो that may have to show you a seasonal breeding in that season. So the animals like a mare that has a long day breeders, when the days has to increase uh, in their length, then the mares show the cycle when the day length is increases. Whereas the short day breeders, the begins to cycle as a day length decreases. ये शो करती हैं जब डे लेंथ जो है डिक्रीज होती है, like a sheep and goats, they show the cycle of estrus in the cold seasons, whereas the mare shows the life cycle of that estrus cycle seasonally in the hot season when the days are long, whereas the sheep and goat shows the estrus cycle seasonally whenever the days are short. जब छोटे दिन होते हैं तो उस वक्त ये गोट और शीप्स यानी इस साइकिल शो करती हैं। जब बड़े दिन हो जाते हैं तो मेयर्स जो हैं वो ईस्टर साइकिल शो करती हैं। तो दे आर सीजनल ब्रीडर्स, तो दे शो द ईस्टर साइकिल ओनली whenever there is a particular seasons. So the monoestrous animals like the dogs, wolves, or foxes and bears, they show the estrus only in a year for a particular days. So the period of estrus cycle lasts for several days, but it shows one cycle per year. This might be in the dog and the cat that might have to show the estrus cycle twice a year, but the mostly the wolves and foxes and the bears show the estrus cycle in a year. The reproductive process in the mammals during the regression of a corpus luteum, a new development follicles on the ovary begins to release the estrogen. In addition to preparing the reproductive tract for ovulation, estrogen induces the estrus heat in the female, and estrus, the period of time when a female animal is receptive to the male for a mating purpose. After ovulation, the egg ovum is received by the infundibulum, and that is a funnel-like structure, the funneled to the oviduct. So, if a female has been bred during the estrus, जब estrus में होगी और heat period होगा, then the viable sperm reaches the fallopian tube to fertilize the egg. Egg को fertilize करेगा, and the pregnancy occurs. So the sperm has to travel from a vagina to the oviduct. There is a funnel-like structure in the infundibulum where it has to mate. वहाँ पे egg को जाके fertilize करेगा और zygote बनेगा, and the zygote is travel back towards the uterus, and that has to attach, the embryo has to attach with the uterus, and development goes on, and when the baby has to be matured, at the optimum gestation period, the parturition will take place to give offspring or to give a birth to the baby. So this is the process by which the reproduction has to be performed. So the progesterone, as mentioned, the corpus luteum has to remain throughout the pregnancy to produce the progesterone. The corpus luteum always persists for a whole pregnancy, and it has to maintain the progesterone level in the body to maintain the pregnancy in the females. So the progesterone later on will be developed also by the uterus, and as well as the corpus luteum has to initiate the progesterone concentration higher in the females for maintenance of the pregnancy and closure of the cervix, and that has performed initially by the corpus luteum, and later on the uterus and the embryo has to uh, to accompanied with a corpus luteum to develop the progesterone level and to maintain it for up to the parturition and the gestation period. Whenever completes, then again the progesterone level has to decrease and the estrogen level has to increase, and then the initiation of the parturition will take place. The progesterone prevents an estrus period during the pregnancy, helps to implant and nourish the embryo, and helps to develop the memory system of the female. The fertilization, the union of the haploid sperm, the 23 chromosomes will be given by the sperms, and haploid ovum 23 chromosomes in the human being comes from ovum, and that has to develop the diploid, means that has to develop the zygote, which is possessing of 46 chromosomes. The actual beginning of the pregnancy starts from here. The sperms and the ovaries in the animals has to be performed by a natural breeding. When the bred naturally, the male deposits the semen into the vagina of the female, and the sperm makes their way through the cervix into the uterine body, both the uterine horns, and finally into the oviducts. If the sperms were deposited at the proper time in the relation to ovulation, the sperm and the egg should unite and fertilization occurs. The fertilized ovum or a zygote begins a process of a cellular division and becomes an embryo. The process by which the naturally fertilization has to take place, but we are doing it artificially as well to inseminate the animals to produce the better quality of springs by giving a better semen or a better semen of the bulls, so that we may have to obtain an offspring of a better quality. So at the first, the embryo floats freely in the uterus and obtaining its nourishment from a fluid secreted by the uterine wall. The embryo will then attach to the wall of the uterus, and 20 days in cattle varies with the species, and begins taking a recognizable form, at which the time it becomes a fetus. So the embryo is encompassed by a fluid-filled membrane called a amnion, which protects the embryo from the mechanical disturbances. The amnion is surrounded by the chorion, which functions as a protective coat and points of a nutrient exchange. So this is the diagram in which I have the diestrus, proestrus, estrus, and metaestrus, and diestrus is shown. So the cycle has been shown that it is started from a diestrus and ends at the diestrus. So that in the diestrus there is the progesterone level is higher and the estradiol is a lower at the concentration, and then the prostaglandin is also at a zero level. That has the corpus luteum is increased in it and having the corpus luteum well developed, which is producing the progesterone and maintaining it. Now, whenever there will be the start of the proestrus, in which the estradiol has to increase in its concentration and the progesterone level has to decrease in its, and the prostaglandin also increases, and the surge has to be observed that the luteinizing hormone has to increase in its highest level when the estrous cycle has to initiated. The follicular stimulating hormones has also to be increased, and when the luteinizing hormone has to rupture the follicle, and that has to cause the ovulation, then the estrous cycle has to stop, and then the mate estrus has to start, and this has to allow the mating over here. And if the mating is performed, then the N estrus has to start and the estrus cycle has to stop, and pregnancy will start over here. So that if the pregnancy has to be started, then the estrous cycle has to cease and the gestation period has to start, that the zygote has to develop into the embryo, and the embryo has to develop into a fetus, and then the offspring or a baby of same species will be born, and then the estrus restarts. Otherwise, if the pregnancy does not occur, then the mate estrus will start, and then the mate estrus after a mate estrus, the diestrus will start, and diestrus has to be converted into the again the proestrus. So the proestrus is a condition in which the follicle enlarges, estrogen increases, vascularity of the female reproductive tract increases, endometrial glands begins to grow, and the estrogen level achieves the peak. So this is the one of the way where the proestrus is starts, whereas after a proestrus, the proestrus is a beginning of a developing the female for a estrus, or to develop a heat in the female. So in the estrus, that allows the male to mount and estrogen decreases, the luteinizing hormone surge occurs, which has to cause the ovulation. The luteinizing hormone surge occurs and ovulation takes place within 24 to 48 hours after a surge of a luteinizing hormone. जब luteinizing hormone की concentration increase हो जाएगी, तो that is causing the rupture of a follicles which has to shed the ova. वो ova develop करेगा, और that surge has to take a 24 to 48 hours to cause ovulation. जब ovulation हो जाएगी, then the estrous cycle has to the estrus has to stop, and the then the mate estrus has to start. So uterine motility high with a contraction moving towards the oviduct, and that motility has to allow the sperms to be transported to a oviduct, that is an infundibulum, where the funnel type structure is present, where the sperm has to mate with the ova and to fertilize the ova, and the zygote will be developed. That zygote has to now travel back towards the uterine body, where it has to attach with the uterine body and the nourishment will start, and that attachment of the embryo will take place and the fetus will be developed from that embryo, and then the baby will be developed from that fetus, which has to born at the time of parturition. So cervical mucous membrane volume increases in this condition, whereas the met estrus has to estrogen level will be lower than the ovulation in a cow will take place. The corpus luteum hemorrhagicum will be developed at the site of a follicle, a rupture of a follicle, where the uterus has to cause a contraction subside and the endometrium glands has to continue to grow and become spoiled. In the cattle, bleeding occurs in the met estrus, which is the sign of a met estrus when there is a bleeding. After the estrus, then in the met estrus, the animals just mating uh, for a courtship with the male. So therefore, the mostly if you are dealing to provide the male to the female at the time of a estrus, the animal will not allow the male at the time of a mate estrus. Therefore, mostly it happens that the delay has caused the loss of a estrous cycle. So the
Excuse me,
follicular
sir.
stimulating hormone increases and triggering the growth of the follicles. So the diestrus
Excuse me,
सर
has
आप
sir.
प्लीज हमें 5 मिनट दीजिए
the
सर
progesterone
12 मिनट
levels
सर
will
वेट
increase in the diestrus, follicular stimulating hormone
भाई
has to increase. Then the
भाई
increase
सर
at
ने
this
सबको म्यूट
time
कर
point
रखा है
मैंने
सब।
सबको
to
म्यूट किया
cause
है
the
भाई,
growth
आवाज
of
नहीं
the
जाएगी।
follicles, and then the
मैंने हैंड
uterus
फ्री में
has to
लगाया है।
seek the fillets, but volume gradually
रिकॉर्डिंग
decreases.
ऑन है, आप
The
सब लेट हो जाएं,
contraction
बस
stops
रिकॉर्डिंग
and the
देखना फिर।
corpus luteum regress at the end of this period if the female is not pregnant due to a prostaglandin
एक्सक्यूज मी
release. So the
सर।
prostaglandin will be released if there is no pregnancy. Then again, in the diestrus, the follicles has to regrow, and the maturity of the follicles will occur, and then so estrus will starts, and then
मुदस्सिर टाइम
again the
पे
estrus will develop in which the ovulation
लीव पे
takes
क्लास
place.
लीव पे यार टाइम पूरे दे सर।
So that the Easter cycle, having a cow 21 days and Eve has have a
दोबारा शुरू
70
हो गया
days,
सर, दूसरा
and
लाइट
the
शुरू।
sow has a 21 days
लाइट
and mare has a
सर बस
21 days.
रीडिंग
The
फटी है।
pro-estrus
सब अपने
is
अपने
a
हाथ
3 to
उठाओ,
4
कैमरा से देख ही लें।
days, and it passes in the cow Eve's 2 to 3 days, and even 3 to 4 days in the sow, and 2 to 3 days in the mare. So Easter cycle will be for 12 to 18 hours, and
सर एक्सक्यूज मी
Easter
सर
cycle in the eves it will be 24 to 36 hours,
सर
whereas the sow has a 48 to 72 hours, and also in the mares 4 to 8 days. So the mate estrus will be taking place 3 to 4 days in the cows, and mate estrus will be 2 to 3 days in the eves, and sow has a 2 to 3 days in the sow, and the mare has a 2 to 3 days. Whereas the diestrus will take
सर
place in
प्लीज
the cow for the period of 10 to 14 days, and in the
सर सुन रहे
eves
सर।
10 to 12 days, and for a sow,
सर 12
so
बजे
it
मिड है
might
सर।
be 11 to 13 days,
एक्सक्यूज मी
and
सर।
even and the
सर
mare has 10 to 12 days.
सस्ते नशे करेंगे।
So the causes of the anestrus may be the pregnancy, maybe the presence of a offspring, maybe the pathology, maybe the stress, nutrition, and the season in the seasonal
सर
polyestrus.
हमारा पेपर है
अब एक ही हल है, लीव कर जाओ।
The puberty
जब
average
जैसे
age
ही
आई
of
थिंक
the
वी
पेपर आ
शुड
जाए
डू
तो
इट
सब
puberty,
लीव कर
the
जाए ना।
male and the
अभी
female
ले क्लास,
of
जैसे ही
various
पेपर आए तो सब
species.
लीव कर
That's
जाए।
alfalfa has 2 to 3 years, or in a female 1
सर तो
year,
आवाज नहीं जा रही। हाँ
and in a bovine it may be 11 months. That might have to take a 7 to 18 months in a bovine, 11 months for a female, 9 to 24 months. In a camel it may take 3 to 4 years, and 3 years for a female. Canine has to 9 months. Mostly it averages is from 5 to 12 months, and 12 months for the female, that may be 6 to 24 months. average. So equine may have to take at 14 months, 10 to 24 months in a male, whereas 18 months that might have a 12 to 19 months for a female. Feline has a 9 months and
Sir,
8 to 10
please,
months for
sir.
a male and 8 months for female and 4 to 12 months for female. Llama has a 2 to 3 years for a male maturity and 6 to 12 months for a female maturity. Ovine has a 7 months that may have to take a 6 to 9 months for the males, whereas the 7 months, 4 to 14 months for a females. Porcine may have to take a 7 months for a maturity in the male, 5 to 8 months averagely, whereas to 6 months for the females that may have averagely to take a
Excuse me,
5 to
sir.
7 months. So
पेपर आ गया है किसी के
these are
पास?
the puberty ages of the different species. The estrous cycle can be divided into 4 stages, as I have told you, the proestrus,
क्लास का टाइम भी
estrus,
खत्म हो गया है
metestrus, and
हमारा भी है।
diestrus. The ovulation usually occurs during the estrus. Cow and buffaloes ovulate during the metestrus. Proestrus and estrus comprises the follicular phase. Corpora lutea develops during the metestrus and functions at optimum during diestrus. Metestrus and diestrus make up the luteal phase. The follicular phase, the dominant, the ovarian structure,
हेलो सर, गुड
estrogen,
मॉर्निंग।
the dominant, the hormone. The luteal phase has a corpus luteum, the dominant ovarian structure, whereas the progesterone, the dominant hormone. The 4 stages of the estrous cycle, that proestrus, that is the
Sir.
follicular enlargement, estrogen increases the vascularity of the female reproductive tract, increases the endometrial glands, begins to grow the estrogen level peak. Whereas the estrus allows the male to mount and estrogen decreases toward the end of a luteinizing hormone surge occurs. Ovulation takes place within the 24 to 48 hours after a surge of a luteinizing hormone. Uterine motility are high with a contraction moving towards the oviduct. Sperm transport is optimal and cervical mucus volume increases. Whereas in the metestrus, the estrogen low and corpus luteum hemorrhagicum present. Ovulation occurs in a cow and a buffalo uterus, whereas the contraction subsides. Endometrial glands continue to grow and becomes coiled in the cattle. Bleeding occurs. Follicular stimulating increases, triggering growth of follicles. Diestrus, in this, the progesterone level will increase and follicular stimulating hormone concentration will be decreased, but increases at some point to cause the growth of a pre-ovulatory follicles. Uterus secretes the fluids, but the volume of a fluid decreases over time. Um, Contraction stops and corpus luteum regresses at the end of this
Sir.
period if the female is not pregnant. The estrous cycle is 21 days in the
सर,
cow, 17 days in the ewes, 21 days in the sow, and 21 days in the mare. Pro-estrus is 3 to 4 days in the cows, and 2 to 3 days in the ewes, and 3 to 4 days in the sow, and 2 to 3 days in the mare. Estrus is of a 12 to 18 hours, of a
सर,
cow 12, 24 to 36
सर मिड
hours,
का
in the
टाइम हो रहा है
ewes
सर।
at 48 to 72 hours, in the sow, and 4 to 8 hours in the mare. Whereas the met estrus is a 3 to 4 days, and the eves have a 2 to 3 days, and the sow has a
सर
2 to
जी,
3 days, and mare has a 2 to 3 days.
नहीं सर जी।
Diestrus is in the cow, it is a 10 to 14 days, eves has a 10 to 12 days, and in the sow it is 11 to 13 days, and in the mare that is
हेलो,
10 to 12 days. The anestrus has
हाँ
an
जी।
follicular stimulating increase that triggers the follicular growth. Proestrus in the dog is a estradiol increase and peaks at the end, and also bloody discharge begins. Whereas the estradiol declines and luteinizing hormones surge and ovulation takes place. Progesterone increases even before ovulation. Met estrus 1, it is after 20 days, and progesterone will be increased and increase in the estradiol level. Where in the mate estrus 2, it will take us 70 days, and progesterone declines and estrogen declines, prolactin increases, and then declines patterns the same in the pregnant and non-pregnant bitches. Pseudo pregnancy occurs in non-pregnant bitches because of an increase in the prolactin. In the case, the estrus is of a 9 days and proestrus is a 8 days. Repeats until the mating occurs and estrus when the estradiol present and progesterone is low throughout. After a mating, the luteinizing hormone surge induced, progesterone increases, then decreases. Estrus returns after parturition when progesterone goes back down. The phases of estrus cycle in the estrus is the phase when the female is in heat. The animal is receptive to mating and will stand for a copulation with a male. The female exhibits the signs of heat. An enlarged vulva and discharge from it are signs, whereas some females exhibit the behaviors indicate readiness for mating, such as when a cow mounts another cow in the mating position is one of the signs that the animal is in the estrus. The phases of the estrus, like mate estrus, is the phase following the heat, and then the ovulation occurs during a mate estrus, as do other processes that helps maintain a pregnancy should conception occurs. Diestrus is the phase in the estrus cycle when the reproductive system assumes that the conception has occurred, even if it has not. So diestrus is a phase in which the several days has to go on and long depending on the species of an animal. Though the diestrus period may have to prolong, and it depends again species to species. The pro-estrus is the period following a diestrus in which the preparation is being made by the reproductive cycle for the next heat period and ovulation takes place. If the conception has occurred, the estrus cycle ceases until it is renewed after a gestation and a parturition. So the parturition restarts, the estrus cycle restarts after the parturition takes place. The phases of the estrus cycle, the animal producers can be more efficient in the animal reproductive management if they know the phases of a estrus cycle. Carefully observations by a trained producers and records on the reproductive cycle to assure the production of the young animals at the best time. For example, the cattle producers often breed cows to assure the calving in the spring when the pasture grasses are beginning to grow. This allows a cow to produce a maximum milk for nutrition and growth of the calves. The estrus cycle is measured as the time between the two consecutive estrus periods. The duration of the estrus cycle varies among the species of a livestock. Cow sow mare has a 19 to 21 days, Eves has a 15 to 17 days. The estrus cycle begins with the ovulation of a follicles and ends with the ovulation of the next follicles. When it erupts, the follicles releases the egg to the oviduct and develops a corpus luteum hemorrhagicum. The corpus luteum hemorrhagicum lasts 2 to 3 days before it is replaced by the corpus luteum. So the duration and the signs of the estrus are cows has a 12 to 24 hours, mare has a 4 to 9 days, and sow has a 24 to 72 hours, whereas the eaves have the 24 to 36 hours in the standing of mountain. The average reproductive cycles that the cow has a 21 days, that is a polyestrus, and the eaves has a 17 days, it is a seasonal estrus, and the sow has a 21 days, and the animal is a polyestrus, and the mare has a 21 days, and the mare is a polyestrus, but seasonal polyestrus. So the length of the estrus is 12 to 18 hours in the cow, 29 hours in the eaves, 48 to 72 hours in the sow, and 4 to 8 days in the mare. So the ovulation takes place 8 to 12 hours after the estrus and near the end of the estrus. So So this is the mare has to take 3 to 6 days, and the gestation period in the cow is 282 days. The eaves has 148 days. The sow has 115 days, and the mare has 335 days gestation period. So likewise, the approximately values for the selected reproductive events in the female domesticated animals is shown in this table. The variation in the uh, cycle types, the cow eaves, so mare have a long cycle. The rare's mice hamster has a short cycle. The rabbit, cares, mink, and parents camels have an induced cycle. The reproductive organs changes at the estrus in the ruminants increase the uterine and the oviductal motility or a tone. Dilation and opening of the externus of a cervix takes place. Increase the vascularity of the uterus. Then the discharge of the mucus from the vagina and cervix takes place. Edema of the vulval mucous membranes takes place, and the villar discharge at the proestrus in the bitches and the cats, and at the metaestrus in the cows takes place. The signs of the estrus are that the vocalization, the cows, goats, and some buffaloes vocalize or give us some time of a special type of devices. The mounting other heartmates, the cows may have to mount on the other animals. Frequent urination before these, the frequent urination is one of the signs of the estrus. The decreases in the milk yield and appetite, cervicovaginal discharge has to stop. Mounting other cows in a proestrus and extending to the mounted at the estrus increase the physical activity. These are the signs. The sign of the estrus is that is the mounting female is mounting other female. The secretion from the vagina has to be observed in the estrus period, and estrus in the the buffaloes show no mounting, a slight discharge usually seen when the animal sits. Many buffaloes are in silent estrus without bellowing and temporary teat engorgement, sudden laydown of milk in the teats 1 to 2, 3 days before the estrus onset called doki is shown by buffaloes. So the Easter signs are marked during the late evening and early morning. Tail twitching is seen in the buffaloes. The standing estrus may be seen that the animal is standing and the other female is mounting on him. The twitching of the tail is one of the sign in the buffaloes. The estrus in the bitches, dogs are monoestrus with the intraestrus intervals ranging from 4.1 to 13 months or 7 months averagely. The proestrus bleeding that may have averagely 9 days attracts the males, but no mating vulval edema is observed. The estrus may have to averagely having a 9 days sexual receptivity, which deviates the tail and the vulvar edema disappears. Estrogen decreases and progesterone increases. Mostly the dogs are monoestrus. Uh, the dogs are monoestrus that has to take as averagely the 7th period. The proestrus is a physical turgent swelling of a vulva and appearance of a biliary discharge as to take place. Vaginal cytology will change with the very early non-cornified epithelial cells as to increase toward the end of the proestrus. Behavior of the bitches is a restlessness, secretes the pheromones, but is aggressively negative towards the male, becoming a more passive towards the start of estrus. In the estrus, the vulva swelling will often and discharge is slightly pink to straw and colored. Some females will still have a bloody discharge in the estrus, which is a normal. Vaginal cytology will have a high concentration of conified epithelial cells with a little debris. Behavior which seeks male turns hindquarters towards him and raises a pelvic region, waves tail to one side, and finally stands for mating by male. Wolf heat is a split heat, have apparently a normal heat but go out of a heat without ovulation and followed by another heat 2 to 6 weeks after later, and that is known as a fertile heat. So met estrus is a losses of a vulva swelling and no discharge. Vaginal cytology is no conified cells and a high number of the white blood cells will be seen, and the behavior non-acceptance of a male. Period of ovarian inactivity and no vaginal discharge will not return to heat again until at least 4 months. So the extension in the pseudo-pregnancy of a met-estrus period in which the progesterone concentration remained elevated, the female will have a nest-building behavior and enlarged mammary glands. So the vaginal cytology in the bitches will show the RBCs during the early proestrus, small parabasal cells during the mid-proestrus with the few RBCs, and parabasal cells during a mid to a late proestrus, and conified epithelial cells during the estrus, a few parabasal cells and neutrophils and RBCs during a late estrus and diestrus, and then the sixth is the slide of a the estrus. Pro-estrus is a 4 to 14 days, estrus is a 21 days, di-estrus is a 60 days, and the N-estrus is a 100 days inactive. So this is the chart of a length of estrus cycle and duration of the estrus cycle. Mostly the animals having a vulval swelling, enlarged blood discharge from a vulva, and there will be a copulation, and the animal has to see that that allows the male in the first stage for quietus, and then trans down, and then there will be the attachment of a male and female. The vulva effector muscles contracts, allows the penis forming. The copulatory tie will take place in the dog and mating. So the luteinizing peak, the greatest number of the ovulation occurs 24 to 78 hours after the luteinizing peak. The luteinizing hormone peak and breeding can occur time from the luteinizing peak and to the fertile for that period will be 4 to 7 days. So plasma progesterone concentration rises prior to ovulation. Follicle will start utilizing before the ovulation. Measurement of a serum progesterone can be used as a means to determine the day of ovulation, and breeding can be highly variable. Breeding management of the bitches, peak fertility from a day of a luteinizing hormone surge to a 6 days post luteinizing surge. That is 2 days before the ovulation to 4 days after ovulation. Two breeding and 2 days apart are suggested. Optimum time to breed can determined by the luteinizing surge and clinical methods. Average bitch may ovulate at 12 days of a proestrus. However, it may ovulate as early as day 5 of a proestrus to the 30 of a proestrus. Hence, mating on the predetermined day may fail to result in conception. A poor correlation exists between the behavioral events and the endocrine events. Some bitches may refuse to accept the particular males. Breeding should thus be done on the basis of a vaginal cytology and disappearance of a vaginal Tugger are assay of a luteinizing hormone. So the estrus in a sheep, estrus is detected by the teaser marker RAM that shows the Feldman response to show the teaser, and the marker RAM with a grease applied over the briquette and show the eaves estrus marked by the ether. So signs of estrus in a goat is the vocalization, wagging of a tail, up and down movement of the tail, slight discharge, pawing the ground with the legs, and vulvar edema, vaginal congestion. A goat in the estrus may sometimes develop the udder. The signs of the estrus in equids are generally shown on teasing, urinating in front of a stallion, a lip synchrony towards the stallion, winking of a clitoris, squatting, and cervical relaxation. In the estrus in the camel, the estrus behavior in the male, extrusion of the soft palate and female camel, and 2 to 3 the mating stance. Estrus in the cat, the Laudius response shown by a female cat in the estrus in the presence of a tom cat and dropping of its ears beside this cat shows the vocalization. The estrus estrus in so the peculiar turning of the ears and vulval edema is shown in the photographs is so extends to be mounted by the person. The reproductive process in the mammals, corpus luteum secretes the hormones progesterone, which helps prepare and maintain the reproductive tracts for pregnancy. And fertilization of an egg occurs and the corpus luteum remains for the duration of the pregnancy. And if the fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum regresses. In the poultry, the sperms are introduced into the oviduct from the cloaca and moves up the oviduct to the infundibulum where the fertilization takes place. Eggs that are already forming when the mating takes place are not fertilized. This means that the first few eggs laid after a mating may not be fertile. So sperm cells can remain viable in the oviduct for 2 or 3 weeks, though viability decreases as time passes. The yolk is released from the hands ovary and falls into the infundibulum, where the female germ cells on the outer edge of the yolk is fertilized by the sperm. The fertilized yolk or embryo moves through the reproductive tract, acquiring the normal egg components: albumin, shell membrane, thin white shell. This is the fertilization and formation of an egg in a poultry that has an ovary, the empty follicle from which the yolk is entering the oviduct, and albumin secreted portion of the oviduct, isthmus in which the shell membranes are formed, and uterus or a shell gland. So this is the yolk and albumin secreted around the yolk, and germinal disc or the fertilized egg. The fertilization and formation of an egg in a poultry. After the egg is laid, the embryo continues to develop with the proper temperature and humidity. The contents of the egg provides a nourishment for the embryo during incubation and for 3 to 4 days after the chick has hatched. The reproductive failure in the livestock, sterility or inability to reproduce, may be caused by a number of reasons. Permanent or a temporary sterility can be results of a specific physical defect, that particularly the diseases, environmental factors, or nutritional aspects. Reproductive failure in the livestock, the factors that affect the reproductive ability include the following: and anatomical factors, diseases, environmental factors, and other factors such as the nutrition, toxic plants, or genetic factors. Anatomical factors like a cryptocardism, a hereditary condition where both of the testicles fails to descend into the scrotum, resulting in complete sterility. Unilateral cryptocardism, a hereditary condition where one of the testes fails to descend into the scrotum, resulting in the reduced fertility. Scrotal hernia, a condition where a part of the intestine passes through the inguinal canal into the scrotum, that it may not cause sterility. A scrotal hernia may cause an animal not to breed, and it can be a dangerous. Malformed penis, a penis resulting from an injury or a birth defect that causes the penis to be malformed to the extent that copulation can not be performed. Pre-Martin, a condition with a twin calves of the opposite sex, where the female calf's reproductive tract does not develop completely, causing a sterility in the 90% of the cases. Infantile, or absence of ovaries, a condition where the ovaries fails to develop, do not function, or are absent because of a hormone imbalance. The anatomical factors like endocrine disturbances, hormonal or glandular reproductive disturbances in females resulting from one or more cycles on the ovaries. Brucellosis is a disease which is known as a Banks disease, a bacterial disease that causes the destruction of the cartilaginous of the uterus and may result in the abortion of the fetus in the later months of gestation. Preventable by vaccination, brucellosis affects the cattle, swine, sheep, goats, horses, dogs, some wildlife, elk, bison, and infected animals must be slaughtered. Vibrosis is also one of the venereal disease found in the cattle that causes the infertility, early embryonic death, and abortion. Vaccinations are effective at preventing vibrosis. A similar type of organism can infect the sheep. Trichomonosis is a venereal disease caused by a protozoa that infect the cattle, causes the early embryonic death and abortion. Vaccination is not always an effective means of a prevention. So the leptospirosis is a bacterial disease that causes the loss of a body weight, hemolytic anemia, and abortion. Leptospirosis affects the cattle, swine, sheep, goat, dogs, and horses and can effectively be prevented by a vaccination. Infectious bovine rhinotracheitis is a respiratory viral disease that causes a pneumonia, fever, infertility, impaired fetal circulation, and eventually abortion. Infectious bovine rhinotracheitis can effectively be prevented via vaccination. Bovine viral diarrhea, a viral disease that causes the ulcerations throughout the digestive tract, fever, and diarrhea. Abortion is caused by the infection of a cartilaginous. Vaccinations are an effective means of a prevention of a bovine viral diarrhea. Environmental factors, mechanical injury, physical damage to the reproductive organs caused by the injuries due to conditions such as the improper handling, unsafe facilities, fighting among animals, or complications during the parturition or a copulation. Stress, severe climatic conditions, primarily extreme heat, high population density, rough handling, other stressful environmental factors can cause reproductive distress. Nutritional deficiency, reproductive inability can be caused by the insufficient levels of feed intake, quality of nutrients needed to meet the high demands put on the body's metabolism due to fertility, pregnancy, lactation, and other events involved in reproduction. Lack of conditions or obese condition usually reduces the reproductive efficiency with a lack of a condition caused by a low nutrition. The body does not have the energy necessary for reproductive activities. During obesity, fatty deposits collects in or around the reproductive organs, impairing the functions and productivity of the animal. The falling vitamins and minerals are known to be affect reproduction if they are not balanced in the animal's diet. Vitamin A shortened the periods of gestation, higher incidence of retained placentas, stillbirths, abortions, mastitis, cause born blind or uncoordinated. The vitamin E, poor conception rates, higher incidence of stillbirths, and newborn mortality can occur due to a deficiency of a vitamin E. Phosphorus, poor conception rates, delayed puberty, lower weaning rates or erecting heat. Calcium deficiency increased the calving difficulty, uterine prolapse, and retained placenta. Cobalt, the poor conception rates and general reproductive failure. Iodine, retained placentas, delayed puberty, arrested fetal development, irregular or suppressed heat, abortion, stillbirth, and cows that are blind, hairless, and have enlarged thyroid glands. The copper delayed the puberty, abortion, retained placentas, iron can deficiency can cause a general reproductive failure, anemic and young. Manganese can cause a irregular and suppressed heat, whereas the ingestion of a toxic plants, poisonous plants can also cause a reproductive stress or abortion. The following plants can cause abortion, birth defects in cattle. Locovite or a snake weed and ponderosa pine may have to develop or cause the abortions. The following plants can cause the abortion in a sheep and goats. Lupinus, sweet clover, and onion grass can cause the abortion in the sheep. Genetic factors like some bloodliness are known as having a high genetic factors, weakness of sterility or low productivity. Inbreeding also may result in a lower fertility. So thank you very much. That's the end of this lecture. Actually, I tried it to complete it for our last 3 classes, but did not complete